Hi, I'm Madison. I'm a 22-year-old electrical engineering student, and I've been working full-time since I was 19 to support my family. But that Thanksgiving, the people who raised me threw me out of their house like I was nothing more than trash, right in front of 15 family members, all because I chose trade school over a traditional 4-year degree. What they didn't know, what they couldn't have imagined in their wildest dreams, was that I had been paying their mortgage for the past 3 years. Every single month, $1,800 came out of my account to keep the roof over their heads. And when they decided I wasn't worthy of sitting at their table anymore, well, let's just say the bank had some very interesting things to say about that. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you how we got here, because this story, it's going to make your blood boil. Have you ever been made to feel like a failure by the people who are supposed to love you unconditionally? Like your dreams and aspirations mean absolutely nothing because they don't fit into their perfect little box of what success should look like? Drop a comment below and tell me about it, because I have a feeling I'm not the only one who's lived through this nightmare. The Thompson family dinner table had always been a place of achievement. Both my parents, Robert and Linda, held master's degrees. Dad in business administration, Mom in education. They met in graduate school, built their careers in corporate America, and raised my sister Sarah and me with one unwavering belief. College was the only path to success. Period. End of discussion. For years, I bought into it completely. I was valedictorian of my high school class, scored in the 95th percentile on my SATs, and had acceptance letters from 3 different universities. I was supposed to be their golden child, their proof that their parenting philosophy worked. But somewhere between my freshman year of college and watching my dad stress eat his way through another round of corporate layoffs, something clicked for me. I started paying attention to the skilled workers who came to fix our air conditioning, our plumbing, our electrical issues. These people commanded respect, charged premium rates, and seemed to have something my parents never had: job security. When I mentioned this observation at dinner one night during my sophomore year, the temperature in the room dropped about 20 degrees. "Madison, honey," Mom said in that voice she used when she thought I was being particularly naive. "Those are jobs for people who couldn't make it through college. You're too smart for that kind of work." Dad nodded, cutting his steak with more force than necessary. We didn't sacrifice everything to put you through school so you could throw it all away on some blue-collar fantasy." But the fantasy wasn't blue-collar work. The fantasy was financial independence, meaningful work, and not spending 40 years in a cubicle wondering if the next round of budget cuts would include my position. That's when the financial problems started becoming impossible to ignore. I came home for spring break junior year to find stacks of overdue notices on the kitchen counter. The mortgage payment was 3 months behind. The credit cards were maxed out. Dad's company had restructured his department, which was corporate speak for, "We're cutting your salary by 30% and doubling your workload." "It's just temporary," Mom kept saying, but her voice had this hollow quality to it, like she was trying to convince herself as much as anyone else. "Dad's looking for something better. We just need to get through the next few months." That night, I heard them fighting through the thin walls of our suburban house. Real fighting, not their usual passive-aggressive disagreements about whose turn it was to take out the trash. "We're going to lose everything, Linda." Dad's voice was raw with desperation. "The house, the cars, everything we've worked for." "What about Madison's college fund?" Mom asked. "There is no college fund left," Dad interrupted. "We used it to cover the mortgage last year." I lay in my childhood bed, staring at the glow-in-the-dark stars I'd stuck to the ceiling when I was 12, and made a decision that would change everything. The next morning, I drove to the local temp agency and signed up for every available shift. By the end of the week, I was working 40 hours at a warehouse while still trying to keep up with my classes. The money wasn't great, but it was something. "Madison, what are you doing?" Mom asked when she saw me leaving for work at 5 in the morning. "You need to focus on your studies." "Someone needs to focus on keeping this family afloat," I said, and I'll never forget the look that crossed her face. It was equal parts gratitude and shame, and it broke my heart. That summer, instead of the internship I'd lined up at a marketing firm, I took a full-time position at the warehouse, 50 hours a week, sometimes 60 when they had big shipments coming in. My hands were raw, my back ached constantly, but every 2 weeks, I could hand Mom a check that kept the lights on. By my senior year, I wasn't really attending college anymore. I was working full-time and taking night classes when I could manage it. The $1,800 I was paying toward the mortgage each month meant I couldn't afford the dorm, so I was back in my childhood bedroom, getting up at 4:30 every morning to beat the traffic to work. My parents never said thank you, not once. Instead, they treated my financial contribution like it was expected, like it was the least I could do since I was living at home rent-free. "You're an adult now, Madison," Dad would say whenever I brought up how exhausted I was. Adults contribute to the household expenses. But I wasn't just contributing. I was carrying them. When my friends from high school came home for breaks, talking about study abroad programs and spring break trips and internships at tech companies, I smiled and nodded and pretended my life hadn't become an endless cycle of work, sleep, and worry about money. The breaking point came during my final semester. I was sitting in a career counseling session, half asleep from working a double shift the night before, when the counselor asked me what I wanted to do after graduation. "I honestly don't know," I said, and it was the first completely honest thing I'd said in months. I've been so focused on just surviving that I haven't thought about what comes next. That's when she told me about the electrical training program at the local trade school. High demand, excellent pay, and most importantly, I could complete it in 18 months instead of finishing a degree I'd already been working on for 5 years. The starting salary for a certified electrician in this area is about $55,000, she said, pulling up statistics on her computer. With overtime and specialization, many of our graduates are making $70,000 to $80,000 within 3 years. I stared at those numbers. Dad was making $42,000 at his corporate job after 20 years in the field. And the best part, she continued, is job security. There's always going to be a need for skilled electricians. You can't outsource electrical work to another country. For the first time in 3 years, I felt something I'd almost forgotten existed. Hope. I spent the next 2 weeks researching everything I could about the electrical trade. I talked to contractors, visited job sites, and even shadowed an electrician for a day. Everything I learned reinforced what I already suspected. This wasn't a backup plan or a consolation prize. This was a smart career move. The application process was straightforward. No essays about why I deserved to be there. No letters of recommendation from professors who barely knew my name. Just an aptitude test, a basic interview, and proof that I could handle the physical demands of the job. I was accepted within a week. Now came the hard part, telling my parents. I picked a Tuesday evening in late October, after Dad got home from work, but before Mom started her nightly routine of grading papers at the kitchen table. Sarah was upstairs doing homework, and the house had that quiet, settled feeling that made difficult conversations seem possible. "Mom, Dad, I need to talk to you about something important," I said, settling into my usual chair at the dining room table. They looked up from their phones with the kind of attention parents give when they're pretty sure they're about to hear something they don't want to hear. "I've made a decision about my career path," I continued, my voice steadier than I felt. "I'm going to finish this semester and then enroll in the electrical training program at Riverside Technical College." The silence that followed was so complete I could hear the refrigerator humming in the kitchen. Dad was the first to speak. "Madison, you're 6 months away from finishing your bachelor's degree. You can't just throw that away." "I'm not throwing anything away," I said. "I'm making a practical decision based on market research and career prospects. Electricians in this area start at $55,000, with excellent job security and opportunities for advancement." Mom's face had gone through several different expressions during this exchange, finally settling on the look she usually reserved for students who turned in homework written in crayon. "Honey, I think you're having some kind of breakdown," she said in her most patronizing guidance counselor voice. "The stress of school and work has obviously affected your judgment. Maybe you should talk to someone." "My judgment is fine," I said, pulling out the folder of research I'd compiled. "Look at these numbers. Look at the job growth projections. Look at the average salary compared to most entry-level positions for college graduates." Dad glanced at the papers but didn't really read them. "Madison, we didn't sacrifice everything so you could become a blue-collar worker. Do you have any idea what people will think?" And there it was. The real issue. Not my financial future, not my career satisfaction, not even my happiness. What would people think? I care more about what my bank account will look like than what Karen from your book club thinks about my career choices, I said, and I saw Dad's face flush red. Don't be smart with me, young lady, he snapped. You're living under my roof, and as long as you are, you'll show some respect. Your roof that I've been paying for, I said quietly. The words hung in the air like smoke from a fire nobody wanted to acknowledge. Mom's voice was ice cold when she finally spoke. That money was your contribution to household expenses. Don't act like you were doing us some kind of favor. $1,800 a month is more than a contribution, Mom. It's more than most people pay in rent. Then maybe you should find somewhere else to live, Dad said, standing up so fast his chair scraped against the floor. If you don't appreciate everything we've done for you, if you want to throw your life away on some trade school fantasy, then maybe you're not the daughter we thought we raised. I looked at both of them, these people who had taught me to ride a bike and helped me with homework and cheered at my high school graduation, and I realized something that broke my heart. They would rather disown me than admit they might be wrong. Fine, I said, standing up as well. I'll be out by the weekend. Good, Mom said, but her voice was shaking. Maybe some time in the real world will help you appreciate the opportunities you're throwing away. I went upstairs and started packing. Sarah appeared in my doorway about an hour later, her eyes red from crying. They can't really mean it, she said. You've been taking care of all of us. I sat down on my bed next to a suitcase half full of clothes I'd been washing in the bathroom sink to save money on laundry. Sarah, I need you to understand something. What they're doing to me, it's not okay. And if they can do it to me, they can do it to you too. She was 19, a sophomore at the community college, working part-time at a coffee shop and dreaming of transferring to a 4-year school to study graphic design. Promise me something, I said, taking her hands. Promise me you'll never let anyone make you feel like your dreams are worthless just because they don't match their idea of success. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. That weekend, I moved my stuff into a studio apartment across town. It was small and the heating didn't work great, but it was mine. I started the electrical program the following Monday. For the first few weeks, I thought maybe they'd call. Maybe they'd realize that losing their primary source of income over a disagreement about my career path was insane. Maybe they'd remember that I was their daughter before I was their financial safety net. They didn't call. November passed without a word. I threw myself into my studies, learning about electrical theory and safety protocols and reading blueprints. For the first time in years, I was excited about my future instead of just trying to survive the present. And then Thanksgiving arrived. I wasn't sure if I should go. The last conversation with my parents had ended with Dad telling me I wasn't the daughter they thought they'd raised. But Sarah called me 3 times that week, begging me to come. Grandma and Grandpa are asking about you, she said, and Mom keeps setting a place for you at the table, then taking it away, then setting it again. What do you think I should do? I asked. I think you should come, she said quietly. I think they miss you more than they want to admit. So I went. I bought a nice bottle of wine, put on the dress I'd worn to high school graduation, and drove to the house I'd been paying the mortgage on for 3 years, but was apparently no longer welcome to call home. The driveway was full of cars. Uncle Tom and Aunt Lisa were there with their kids. Grandma and Grandpa Thompson had driven down from Portland. Mom's sister Julie was there with her husband and their twin daughters. It was the full, extended family gathering, exactly the kind of event where my parents loved to show off their successful children. I rang the doorbell like a guest. Mom answered, and for just a second, her face lit up with genuine happiness. Then she seemed to remember that we were in a fight, and her expression went carefully neutral. Madison, she said, we weren't sure if you were coming. Sarah invited me, I said, holding out the wine. I hope that's okay. She took the bottle and stepped aside to let me in. The house smelled like turkey and stuffing and the cinnamon candles Mom always lit for holidays. It smelled like home, which made my chest tight with a complicated mix of longing and anger. Madison! Grandma Thompson swept me into a hug that smelled like lavender and determination. We've been so worried about you, sweetheart. Your mother said you moved out. I could feel Mom's eyes on me, waiting to see how I'd handle this. I did, I said. I got my own place across town. It's small, but it's mine. And how's school going? Grandpa asked. Your mother mentioned you changed your major. This was it, the moment of truth. I could lie, deflect, change the subject, or I could tell the truth and see what happened. Actually, I withdrew from the university, I said, loud enough for the conversations in the living room to pause. I'm in trade school now, studying to become an electrician. The silence that followed was so thick you could have cut it with a knife. Uncle Tom was the first to speak. That's different, he said diplomatically. It's practical, I said. The job market for electricians is strong, the pay is competitive, and there's real job security. Plus, I'll graduate without student loan debt. I could see Dad in the kitchen doorway, his face getting redder by the second. Aunt Lisa, bless her heart, tried to keep the conversation going. That's wonderful, honey. It's so important to find work that makes you happy. It's not wonderful, Dad said, finally joining the conversation. It's a waste of everything we've invested in her education. She was 6 months away from a bachelor's degree and she threw it all away to become a manual laborer. The room went completely silent. Even the kids stopped talking. Robert, Grandma said quietly, but there was steel in her voice. No, Mom. Someone needs to say it, Dad continued, warming up to his theme. We raised our daughter to expect more from herself than this. We sacrificed so she could have opportunities we never had, and she's choosing to throw it all away. I'm not throwing anything away, I said, my voice calm even though my heart was racing. I'm making a smart financial decision based on market research and career prospects. You're taking the easy way out, Mom chimed in from the kitchen. Trade school is for people who can't handle the rigor of a real college education. That's when something inside me snapped. The easy way out? I repeated, standing up from the couch where I'd been sitting with my cousins. Mom, I've been working full-time since I was 19. I've been getting up at 4:30 in the morning and working 10-hour shifts to help keep this family afloat. There is nothing easy about any choice I've made. You've been helping with household expenses, Dad said dismissively. That's what adults do. Household expenses? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Is that what we're calling it? I could see Sarah in the corner, her eyes wide with panic. She knew what I was about to say, and she knew it was going to change everything. You want to know about household expenses, Dad? Let me tell you about household expenses. For the past 3 years, I have paid $1,800 every single month toward the mortgage on this house. Not rent, not a contribution, the actual mortgage payment. I have paid the electric bill, the water bill, and the internet bill. I've bought groceries when there was no money left in your account and put gas in Mom's car when she couldn't afford to fill the tank. The room was so quiet I could hear the timer ticking on the oven. I didn't just help with household expenses, I continued, my voice getting stronger with each word. I kept this family from losing their home. And now you want to lecture me about taking the easy way out? Grandpa Thompson was staring at Dad with an expression I'd never seen before. Uncle Tom had put down his beer and was leaning forward, listening intently. That's enough, Dad said, but his voice had lost some of its conviction. No, it's not enough, I said. Because here's the best part. You threw me out of this house 3 weeks ago because you were embarrassed that your daughter chose trade school over a 4-year degree. You told me I wasn't the daughter you thought you'd raised. But you know what? You kept expecting me to send that $1,800 every month, even after you decided I wasn't worthy of sitting at your table. Mom had gone very pale. Madison, that's not what? That's not what happened? Because I have the text messages, Mom. I have 3 weeks worth of increasingly angry texts asking where this month's payment is. I have voicemails demanding to know when I'm going to fulfill my responsibilities to this family. I pulled out my phone and started scrolling through the messages. Here's one from last Tuesday. Madison, the mortgage payment is due tomorrow. Don't make us call you again. And here's one from Thursday. Your irresponsible behavior is putting the whole family at risk. I looked around the room at 15 pairs of eyes, all staring at me with various degrees of shock and horror. So yes, Uncle Tom, I did change my major. I changed it to a field where I can make a decent living without drowning in student loan debt. I changed it to a career where my skills will always be in demand and I'll never have to worry about being restructured out of a job. And I changed it to something that will let me build a life where I'm valued for more than just my ability to pay other people's bills. How? The timer on the oven chose that moment to go off, its shrill beeping cutting through the tension like a knife. Nobody moved to turn it off. The silence stretched on until Sarah finally got up and turned off the oven timer. In that moment, with everyone staring at me like I'd just confessed to murder, I realized there was no going back. The truth was out there now, hanging in the air like smoke, and everyone in that room knew exactly what kind of people my parents really were. But I wasn't done, not even close. "You know what the really crazy part is?" I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. "I actually kept paying. Even after you threw me out, even after you told me I wasn't your daughter anymore, I kept sending that money because I didn't want Sarah to suffer for your pride." I looked directly at my parents, who were both standing frozen in the kitchen doorway like deer caught in headlights. But last week, I realized something. I realized that enabling your financial irresponsibility wasn't helping anyone. It was just teaching you that you could treat me like garbage and still expect me to clean up your mess. Dad finally found his voice. "Madison, you're making this sound worse than it is. We were going through a difficult time and you were living here." "I haven't lived here for 3 weeks," I interrupted. 3 weeks, Dad, and in those 3 weeks, you've called me 17 times asking for money. Not asking how I'm doing, not apologizing for throwing me out on Thanksgiving, not checking if I'm okay living on my own for the first time, just asking for money. Grandma Thompson had tears in her eyes. She reached over and took my hand, squeezing it gently. "Sweetheart," she said quietly, "how long has this been going on?" 3 years, I said. "Since I was 19. Uncle Tom was doing math in his head. $1,800 a month for 3 years. That's almost $65,000. $64,800, I said. "I know because I've been keeping track. Every bank statement, every money transfer, every receipt. I have documentation of every single payment I've made toward this house." And that was true. Over the past 3 weeks, living alone in my studio apartment with nothing but takeout containers and my thoughts for company, I'd gone through every financial record I could find. What I discovered was even worse than I'd imagined. It started with the bank statements. 3 years of monthly transfers, $1,800 on the dot, always on the 3rd of the month because that's when my paycheck cleared. But as I dug deeper, I found other payments too. Utility bills when they'd fallen behind. Grocery runs when their checking account was overdrawn, car repairs when they couldn't afford the mechanic. I'd been so busy just trying to keep everyone afloat that I'd never stopped to add it all up. When I finally did, the number made me sick. "I need some air," I said, walking toward the back door. I needed a minute to collect myself before I said something I'd really regret. The backyard looked exactly the same as it had when I was growing up. The same swings that Dad had built when I was 7, the same flower beds Mom tended every spring, the same oak tree where I'd hung a tire swing for Sarah when she was little. It all looked so normal, so much like the happy family home I'd always thought it was. But appearances, as I was learning, could be deceiving. Sarah followed me outside, closing the door behind her. "Jesus, Madison," she whispered. "I knew you were helping with money, but I didn't know it was that much." "There's more," I said, leaning against the porch railing. "Things I didn't want to say in front of everyone." Her eyes went wide. "What kind of things?" I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app. "Look at this," I said, showing her the screen. "My savings account. 3 years ago, when I started working full-time, I had $12,000 saved up for emergencies. Want to guess how much is in there now?" She looked at the balance and her face went white. $400. Every time they had a crisis, I dipped into savings. The roof leaked, and they needed $3,000 for repairs. Dad's car broke down, and they needed $1,500 for a new transmission. Mom's root canal wasn't covered by insurance, so I paid the $800 dental bill. "Madison, that's..." She started, then stopped. I could see her processing it all, realizing that our parents hadn't just been accepting my help. They'd been bleeding me dry. And you know what they said every time? I continued. They said it was temporary. They said they'd pay me back as soon as things got better. But things never got better, Sarah. There was always another crisis, always another emergency that required me to empty my savings account. She was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the yard where we'd played as kids. "What are you going to do?" she finally asked. "I'm going to stop," I said simply. "I'm going to let them figure out how to be adults without using me as their personal ATM." "But what about the house?" That was the question I'd been wrestling with for weeks, because as angry as I was, as betrayed as I felt, I still loved Sarah, and the thought of her losing her childhood home because of my decision was almost unbearable. "I don't know," I admitted. "I've been hoping they'd find a way to manage without me, but based on those phone calls I've been getting, I don't think that's happening." Through the kitchen window, I could see our extended family still sitting around the dining room talking in hushed voices. Mom and Dad were nowhere to be seen. "They went upstairs," Sarah said, following my gaze. "Right after you came out here. I think they're fighting." As if on cue, we heard raised voices from the second floor. Not words exactly, but the tone was unmistakable. They were screaming at each other. "This is my fault," Sarah said quietly. "I'm the one who convinced you to come today." "No," I said firmly, turning to face her. "This was always going to happen. I just wish it hadn't been in front of everyone." But did I really wish that? Part of me was glad that our extended family had finally seen what I'd been dealing with. For years, I'd been the perfect daughter at family gatherings, the one with good grades, the one who helped with dishes, the one who never caused any drama. Meanwhile, Mom and Dad got to play the role of proud parents who had raised such a responsible, mature daughter. Now, everyone knew the truth. They knew that my responsibility and maturity had been bought and paid for. They knew that I hadn't been the golden child. I'd been the family bank. "Madison?" Uncle Tom's voice came from the doorway. "Could I talk to you for a minute?" Sarah squeezed my hand and went back inside, leaving me alone with my dad's older brother. Uncle Tom was the family success story, the one who'd built his own construction company from nothing and now employed 30 people. He was also the one who never hesitated to give advice, whether you wanted it or not. "I had no idea," he said, settling into one of the patio chairs. "About the money, I mean." "It's not something I advertised," I said. $65,000. He shook his head. "At your age, that should be going toward your own future, not subsidizing your parents' lifestyle." I waited for the lecture about family responsibility, about how children owe their parents everything. Instead, he surprised me. "When I was your age, I was working construction to pay for night school," he said. "My dad, your grandfather, he never asked me for a dime. Even when things were tight, even when Mom needed surgery and the bills were piling up, he found a way to handle it without making it my problem." "Times were different then," I said. "Were they?" He looked at me seriously. "Or did your parents just make different choices than the rest of us?" Before I could answer, the back door opened and Grandma Thompson came outside. "Madison, honey, I think you should know that your father and mother are packing a bag," she said gently. "They're talking about going to a hotel for the night." "They're leaving?" I asked, shocked. "On Thanksgiving?" "I think they're embarrassed," she said, "and probably scared about what happens next." What happened next? That was the question, wasn't it? "Can I ask you something, Grandma?" I said. "Do you think I'm being unreasonable? Stopping the payments, I mean?" She sat down in the chair next to Uncle Tom and looked at me with the kind of expression that made it clear she was choosing her words very carefully. "I think," she said slowly, "that your parents forgot something very important about being a parent. Our job is to raise you to be independent, not to make you dependent on us or us dependent on you." "But family helps family," I said, echoing something I'd heard my whole life. "Yes," Uncle Tom agreed, "but there's a difference between helping and enabling. There's a difference between supporting someone through a rough patch and becoming their permanent solution to poor financial planning." Grandma nodded. And there's definitely a difference between asking for help and demanding it. From what I heard in there, your parents crossed a lot of lines. The back door opened again, and this time it was Sarah looking upset. They're leaving, she said. Mom says they can't stay here with everyone judging them. Dad's loading the car. I felt a stab of guilt. Despite everything, I hadn't wanted to ruin Thanksgiving for everyone. I just wanted them to understand why I couldn't keep sacrificing my future for their financial irresponsibility. Maybe I should go, I said, starting to stand up. Absolutely not, Grandma said firmly. You are part of this family, and you belong here. If anyone should leave, it's the people who created this mess in the first place. Uncle Tom stood up. I'm going to go talk to your father. He went inside, and through the kitchen window, I could see him intercept Dad in the hallway. There was a brief, intense conversation that ended with Dad throwing his hands up in frustration and walking away. A few minutes later, we heard car doors slamming and an engine starting. My parents were actually leaving. What did you say to him? Grandma asked when Uncle Tom came back outside. I told him that if he left now, he'd be proving that his pride was more important than his family, Uncle Tom said grimly. And I told him that running away wouldn't solve his financial problems. We all went back inside to find the rest of the family sitting around the dining room table looking shell-shocked. Aunt Lisa had tears in her eyes, and my cousin Jake, who was the same age as me, looked like he'd been punched in the stomach. I'm sorry everyone had to see that, I said as we settled back into our seats. Don't you dare apologize, Aunt Julie said fiercely. You have nothing to apologize for. But I ruined Thanksgiving. No, Grandpa Thompson interrupted, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd been the family patriarch for 60 years. Your parents ruined Thanksgiving the minute they decided to treat their daughter like a personal ATM instead of a human being. The next few hours were surreal. We ate Thanksgiving dinner without the hosts, served turkey that my mom had prepared but wasn't there to enjoy. The conversation was stilted at first, everyone clearly processing what they'd witnessed, but gradually it became more normal. And something strange happened. For the first time in years, I actually enjoyed a family gathering. Without the constant tension of wondering whether my parents were going to bring up money or criticize my life choices, I could actually relax and be myself. So, tell us about this electrical program, Cousin Jake said as we were clearing the table. Is it hard? I found myself lighting up as I talked about my classes, about learning to read electrical schematics and understanding power distribution systems. Nobody rolled their eyes or made jokes about me becoming a manual laborer. They asked thoughtful questions and seemed genuinely interested in what I was learning. The demand for skilled electricians is really high right now, I explained, especially with all the green energy initiatives and smart home technology. It's not just about fixing outlets anymore. We're installing solar systems, electric car charging stations, home automation systems. And the pay? Uncle Tom asked, with the practical interest of a small business owner. Starting salary is around $55,000, but most people are making $70 to $80 within a few years. And if you start your own contracting business, I shrugged. The sky's the limit. That's more than I made in my first 5 years out of college, Jake said, and I had $40,000 in student loans to pay off. As the evening wound down and people started heading home, Grandma Thompson pulled me aside. I want you to know that we're proud of you, she said, not just for standing up for yourself tonight, but for everything you've done for this family. Even if your parents can't see it, the rest of us know how much you've sacrificed. I just hope I didn't make everything worse, I said. Sweetheart, sometimes things have to get worse before they can get better. Your parents have been living in a fantasy where they could avoid dealing with their problems as long as you were there to bail them out. Now they're going to have to face reality. 3 days later, reality came knocking. I was at my apartment studying for an upcoming test on electrical safety protocols when my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize, but something told me to answer it. Is this Madison Thompson? A professional-sounding woman asked. Yes, who's asking? This is Jennifer Walsh from First National Bank. I'm calling regarding the mortgage account for 412 Maple Street. Our records show you as an authorized contact for this account." My stomach dropped. I'd forgotten that when I'd started making the payments 3 years ago, Dad had added me to the account so I could handle the monthly transfers more easily. "Well, what can I help you with?" I asked, even though I was pretty sure I already knew. "We haven't received a payment for this month, and when we tried to contact Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, the number on file appears to be disconnected. We are required to inform all authorized contacts when an account becomes delinquent." I closed my eyes and leaned back in my desk chair. How delinquent are we talking? This is the first missed payment, but our records show some irregularity in payment timing over the past several months. We're hoping to resolve this before it becomes a more serious issue. "I understand," I said. "I'll make sure the account holders are aware of the situation." After I hung up, I sat staring at my phone for a long time. The smart thing, the healthy thing, would be to stay out of it, to let my parents deal with the consequences of their financial decisions without my intervention. But Sarah was still living in that house. And despite everything that had happened, I still loved my parents, even if I couldn't stand their behavior. I picked up my phone and called the number I'd been ignoring for weeks. Mom answered on the first ring. "Madison?" Her voice was thick with relief and something that might have been tears. "Oh, sweetheart, I'm so glad you called." "The bank called me," I said without preamble. "You missed this month's payment." There was a long pause. "We've been trying to figure something out." "Where are you guys staying?" I interrupted. "We got a room at the extended stay near Dad's work. It's temporary, just until we can figure out how to fix things." I thought about that. They were paying for a hotel room instead of their mortgage, which meant they really didn't have the money. "Mom, I need you to be completely honest with me. How bad is it?" Another pause. "Pretty bad," she admitted. "After Thanksgiving, Dad's company let him go. They said it was budget cuts, but I think what happened at dinner might have gotten back to someone." My heart sank. Uncle Tom's construction company had done work for Dad's firm in the past. It wasn't impossible that word had traveled. "What about your job?" I asked. "I'm still working, but my salary alone won't cover the mortgage. We've been looking at our options and—" She trailed off. "And what?" "We might have to sell the house." I felt like someone had punched me in the stomach. Sell the house? The house where I'd grown up? Where Sarah was still living? Where all our family memories were stored? "What does Sarah say about that?" I asked. "She doesn't know yet. We haven't told her how bad things are." Of course they hadn't. Just like they'd never told me how bad things were until I was already in too deep to get out easily. "Madison," Mom continued, her voice getting smaller, "I know we have no right to ask this, and I know we've handled everything wrong, but is there any way you could help us through this transition? Just until we figure out what we're going to do?" And there it was. After everything that had happened, after all the hurt and anger and public humiliation, they were still asking me to fix their problems. "I can't keep paying your mortgage, Mom," I said quietly. "Even if I wanted to, I don't have that kind of money anymore." "I know," she said quickly. "We're not asking for that. We don't know what we're doing." For the first time since this whole nightmare started, my mother sounded genuinely lost. Not manipulative, not entitled, just scared and confused. "Let me call you back," I said. "I need to think about this." After I hung up, I sat in my tiny apartment and tried to figure out what the right thing to do was. My parents had made their bed, but Sarah was going to have to lie in it too. And despite everything, they were still my family. I thought about what Uncle Tom had said about the difference between helping and enabling. I thought about what Grandma had said about raising children to be independent. And I thought about what I'd learned in my electrical courses about circuit breakers. Sometimes you have to cut the power to prevent a bigger disaster. Then I picked up my phone and started making calls. The first call was to a bankruptcy attorney I'd found online. The second was to a real estate agent who specialized in short sales. The third was to Sarah. "Madison?" she answered on the first ring. "Are you okay? Mom and Dad have been freaking out since the bank called." "I'm fine," I said. "But we need to talk. Can you meet me for coffee tomorrow morning?" "Of course. What's going on?" "I'm going to help them," I said, "but not the way they want me to." The next morning, I sat across from Sarah at our favorite coffee shop and explained my plan. It wasn't what my parents wanted to hear, but it was what they needed to hear. "I'm going to help them file for bankruptcy and do a short sale on the house," I said. "It'll give them a clean slate financially, but it means starting over." Sarah's face went white. "We're really going to lose the house?" "Sarah, the house was already lost. They haven't been able to afford it for years. I was just postponing the inevitable." She stared into her coffee cup, processing this. "But where will I live?" "That's up to you," I said. "You can find a place with them, or you could move in with me. My lease is up in a few months, and I could get a 2-bedroom apartment. You could finish your degree and figure out what you want to do without having to worry about getting caught in the middle of their financial drama." She looked up at me with tears in her eyes. "You'd do that? After everything?" "You're my sister," I said simply. "This isn't your fault, and you shouldn't have to suffer for their mistakes." That afternoon, I called my parents and explained my offer. I would help them navigate the bankruptcy process and find affordable housing, but I wouldn't be giving them any more money. I would help Sarah transition to living independently, but I wouldn't be subsidizing anyone's lifestyle anymore. There was a long silence on the other end of the phone. "I don't understand," Dad finally said. "You're willing to help us lose everything, but you won't help us keep the house." "Dad, you already lost everything," I said as gently as I could. "You just haven't accepted it yet." It took 3 more conversations and a meeting with the bankruptcy attorney before they finally agreed to my plan. It wasn't easy, and there were moments when they tried to guilt me into just paying the mortgage for a few more months while they figured things out. But I held firm, because I'd finally learned the difference between helping someone and enabling them. And I'd learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to participate in someone else's self-destruction. 6 months later, I graduated from the electrical program at the top of my class. I had a job lined up with a commercial electrical contractor starting at $62,000 a year with full benefits and opportunities for overtime. My parents were living in a modest 2-bedroom apartment and slowly rebuilding their lives. Dad had found a new job that paid less than his old one, but it was honest work that he could handle without my financial support. Mom was still teaching, and together they were learning to live within their means for the first time in years. Sarah had moved in with me, and we'd found a great 2-bedroom apartment close to both my work and her school. She was thriving, taking art classes and working part-time at a design studio. For the first time in her life, she wasn't walking on eggshells, wondering when the next financial crisis would hit. And me? I was free. Free from the weight of everyone else's expectations. Free from the pressure of keeping a family afloat. Free to build my own life on my own terms. The best part was that we were all talking again. Really talking. Not just the superficial conversations we'd had when everything was about money and obligations. My parents had finally apologized. Really apologized for the way they'd treated me. They'd acknowledged that they'd been wrong to expect me to sacrifice my future for their financial irresponsibility. It wasn't perfect. Rebuilding trust takes time, and there were still moments when old patterns tried to resurface. But we were all learning to have healthier relationships with each other. As I sat in my living room that night, looking at my diploma hanging on the wall next to a photo of me and Sarah at her art show, I thought about how far we'd all come. The house on Maple Street was gone, sold to a young family who would hopefully fill it with happier memories than we had. But we'd gained something more valuable, the chance to rebuild our relationships on a foundation of honesty instead of financial obligation. My phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. When I opened it, I saw it was from one of my classmates from the electrical program. "Hey Madison, my uncle's electrical company is looking for someone to head up their new solar installation division. The pay is amazing and they're offering equity. Interested?" I smiled and typed back, "Send me the details." Because that's the thing about breaking free from toxic patterns. Once you learn to value yourself, opportunities start showing up that you never would have noticed when you were too busy fixing everyone else's problems. 6 months ago, I'd been a college dropout with no savings, no prospects, and a family that treated me like a personal ATM. Now, I was a certified electrician with a promising career, a healthy bank account, and relationships built on mutual respect instead of financial dependency. It hadn't been easy, and there had been moments when I'd wondered if I was doing the right thing. But sitting in my apartment that night with my sister laughing in the next room and opportunities knocking on my door, I knew I'd made the right choice. Sometimes you have to stop paying other people's bills before you can start investing in your own future. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do for your family is refuse to enable their dysfunction. As I got ready for bed that night, I thought about all the people out there who might be in similar situations, supporting family members who take their sacrifice for granted, enabling financial irresponsibility out of love, sacrificing their own dreams to fund someone else's lifestyle. If that's you, if you're reading this and seeing yourself in my story, I want you to know something. You deserve better. You deserve to have your contributions acknowledged and appreciated. You deserve to build your own future instead of subsidizing someone else's poor choices. And most importantly, you deserve to be valued for who you are, not just what you can provide. It's never too late to break the cycle. It's never too late to choose yourself. Trust me on this one.